play the audio.
At Benning, we're now bleeding off excess pressure in the strung back. That's what's giving that large white plume. As cold gas meets the warm Florida air and condenses the moisture. Coming up in 1 minute where the flight computers will take over the sequence. Let's listen in to the launch of Falcon 9 with Dragon and the Axiom-2 crew.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are listening right now for the Axiom-2 message, and they are 50 seconds to launch right now. This is live streaming, and I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and bring in some bring in the video. So we'll try to see if we can get this video to stream. So
there, go for launch.
Go for launch.
Wonderful.
Right now.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
So you can hear it there. So we definitely are excited about this. Is a commercial space flight. 20 seconds to launch now.
Shrink this down.
Well, I'll move it over to this way.
T-minus 15.
15 seconds.
T-minus 10.
9.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power. And liftoff, Falcon 9. Go Axiom.
So they are clearing the pad now.
Together we expand what is possible in low Earth orbit.
This is a Falcon 9
AX-2.
with a Crew Dragon on top, and everything is looking good. It's heading to the space station.
That seems longer than it should.
It definitely is. I think they said the space station was somewhere south of Ireland right now, and it's going to chase it down and catch up with it. So that's why these orbital launch times are important, because they've got to catch something in space or hit a certain point.
Power telemetry is nominal. Stage 1 throttle down.
Power telemetry nominal. We're into the throttle bucket. Is the first stage is throttle down power on the Merlin engines in preparation.
Okay, looks like they're throttling down the
Max
engines.
Q.
Max Q is coming, so they always throttle down the engines before maximum dynamic pressure, so to give the rocket through the hardest part of the atmosphere, where it gets the most stress.
At Kennedy Space Center, Complex 39.
So we passed Max Q now.
Stage 1 throttle up. Max Q.
Now they've throttled it up.
We're out of the throttle bucket.
Take 1 Bravo.
Copy 1 Bravo.
We're at full power, and that call at 1 Bravo, that's another one.
You can see the rocket plume at the exhaust is starting to expand as the atmosphere gets thinner and thinner. So this, if you're not familiar with Axiom Space, this is a commercial space provider. This will be their second mission. They're launching 2 astronauts from Saudi Arabia. Peggy Whitson is the commander. She's with Axiom Space now, but she was a NASA astronaut. And from what I understand, I was watching one of the live streams from SpaceX earlier. She is the woman with the most time ever in space, so it's kind of interesting that she's doing that now. It looks like the contrail's coming out. We've got pretty...
It's Peggy Whitson, John Schnoffer, Ali Al-Karni, and Rihanna Barnawi.
Yep, and so that's 2 Saudi astronauts and then 2 other astronauts. But this is a commercial space program, right? This is where we're going, where businesses, commercial space partners are launching both nation states, okay?
Stage separation.
Stage separation, excellent. Everything looks like it's going nominal. But this is how the space program is headed. If commercial partners like this are going to be launching, they're going to be launching these rockets, and nation states and individuals are going to be riding this to the space station, or soon to commercial space stations. Hey, X, thanks for joining us for the live stream.
Engines running as we come back to the launch site or the landing site.
Just happened to time right with Axiom-2's launch, so we're going to cover that. We haven't got all the video streaming up, otherwise we'd like to share that.
Low Earth orbit on the way to the International Space Station.
Oh.
So the second stage is definitely lit, and are we doing a boost back burn today, Jack? Do you know? They're going to land this?
It's very standard. Standard mission.
So,
Stage 1 boost bag shut down.
all right, so they've already completed the
Right on
boost bag.
time. First stage completed the first of 3 burns, heading back to the landing site. Second stage continuing on power and on trajectory.
Acquisition signal.
Yeah, the background's definitely a lot for the windows. We're going to work on that. We got some blinds on order. It definitely makes it a little harder to to do our live stream. But we've worked on improving some stuff. We've got the different pieces here. We've got the ability now to be able to start showing some images. Now these are not of Axiom, but this is some of the Apollo stuff we want to talk about today. But it looks like these astronauts are well on their way. They're riding on the second stage now. And I'm not sure how long that's going to burn. It's probably about another 3 or 4 minutes. They're about 4 minutes and 25 seconds into the flight as of right now. But we did add this live streaming feature now. So now we can show pictures. So like if I wanted to talk about a picture, we can go ahead and if I wanted to talk about the Apollo logos, we now have the ability to start transitioning between these things. So we're trying to make it better every episode.
Trajectory nominal.
Love to hear those words. A nominal trajectory for Dre.
That's really good because the reason why nominal trajectory is so important is they're chasing down the space station. So getting off path is not a good thing. Because it takes a lot of delta V to be a lot of fuel basically to move that rocket to a different course. So things going in the right direction is definitely important. So for Rocket Van, it's nice to join y'all here. We're doing this a little bit earlier here on Sunday. We've got a lot of excitement going on in the space industry right now. And a little excitement back at home. Jack's eating his chips because he's ready for his Super Bowl. He's watching rockets launch. Jack, you want to talk a little bit about what you've been working on that I know you brought out for people to see?
I just finished this today. I'm not completely finished. I have a couple small things to do. But I have been working, let's see, the hatch is somewhere. But this is what the coming video is about. Let me see if I can get it out of the light a little bit. But this is one of the Mercury capsules.
Let's see if I can get us a little bit.
This is Freedom 7 specifically. Let me turn it around so it's flat. But this is Freedom 7. I still have to add the retro pack straps that hold it on. But this is what I've been working on for the past little bit. That is what our video, an upcoming video, will be about. This thing.
We'll put this behind us again, Jack, and that way we can block some of the light.
Helps to slow the vehicle down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. The first stage sees high drag, which runs roughly.
That should be a little bit better.
That should block some of the light from the camera, so trying to improve things so we can see it. But yeah, he's definitely done a nice job on this. So if you could see Freedom 7 here is definitely very well done. He's done a lot of the decals and the painting. He's done a lot of extra painting on it. But this is a pretty big model. So that's pretty good. So in the chat, has anybody watched our Apollo entry video talking about the Apollo, about Apollo?
And doing the landing burn.
All right, we've got the rocket. It's almost ready to land.
Stage 1 landing leg deployed.
And
Landing legs.
it has landed.
And just like that, SpaceX lands another rocket that would have been thrown away.
Probably,
So-
I think this is like the 203rd landing so far. Let's see.
Us old people appreciate earlier episodes. I think I might fall into that category. I do appreciate the earlier episodes. We're continuing to try to get better here at Rocket Van. We're still trying to get our feet under us on what it means to have a regular schedule and trying to get content created. I'm going to get Jack handling some of the chat, so he's going to open that up here, and Jack will start to do the chatting. What we wanted to talk about today is the Apollo video. We want to talk about how we're going to start to handle the iterative engineering approach that was Apollo. It's a good intro video, kind of covers, so one of the best speeches, so if you ever take a speech class, one of the best speeches that you can actually get is going to be the John F. Kennedy moon speech. And it's definitely an inspiring speech. He covers a lot of points about what it was nice to have a vision for our country, of what our country was going to be and what we wanted to accomplish. And I say this for our country, but really just mankind, to have a single goal to the moon. The Americans went to the moon first, but
Which was very ambitious.
It was definitely very ambitious, but all people went to the moon that day. So it was really good. But the people that were behind the space program at that time, and the amount of them was unbelievable. The amount of revenue, the amount of money we spent on the program based to the GDP of the United States was unbelievable. And we accomplished really big things. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about the moon program. But I want to talk a little bit today about let's move your laptop here so we can have this one. Or let's move this here. Put your laptop here so we can see the stream. All right. Just a little moving stuff around.
Axiom?
No, ours.
Oh, okay.
All right. So what I want to talk about is, I've talked to a lot of people about the SpaceX Starship launch, right? And it's a lot of the same conversations. A lot of people said, well, the rocket blew up, so it failed. And I want to start by clarifying, by no means was Starship blowing up a failure. It was actually such a huge success that they got so much data.
The only reason they launched it was to clear the pad because they've already improved.
That is true, because so one of the things that was changed already before this rocket launched, the original Starship launched, the one from and Xavier, if you're still on. I've got this. Let me get a different one.
They're both in the plastic.
They're both in the plastic, but this was the initial Starship launch pad with the 4-leaf clover on it. So that rocket didn't have the latest and greatest that SpaceX has to do for Starship. That was just a prototype that was going to fly to test some things. One, I think mainly the rocket engines. That was a way to get those rocket engines to full thrust. And hey, Think Train, thanks for joining us. Those particular rocket engines were able to fire. They were more powerful than anything. They learned so much. And yeah, the rocket blew up, but the rocket does not cost as much as a single rocket. So if you're building a program to manufacture rockets, you have a big cost to building that. But if you're building where you're going to certify one rocket to fly, right? You're going to say, hey, well, this is our rocket. We're going to fly it. And we're going to build one or two more on the back end. What happens is you start to raise your costs because the entire program is based on 1, 2, 3 rockets. When SpaceX is doing it, they probably have 4 or 5 more ready lined up. You could see them in the mega bays. They're ready to go. They just need to get the pad ready again, and they're going to fly again. So their cost of their program is broken out across the rockets. But once they start reflying those rockets, they're not throwing them away. Those rockets will then be reusable. We just watched a Falcon 9 take Axiom Space on 2, or Axiom Mission 2 to space.
The trunk just separated.
That they separated?
Yeah, the trunk just separated.
Okay, so the trunk just came off.
I think.
Or was that the second stage?
No, that was the entirety of Dragon, I think. Yeah, Dragon separated.
Yeah, separated off of the
They didn't throw the trunk away yet.
Yeah, well, look, that was a satellite going by. So in the feed, you can see a satellite.
That's a satellite?
Something is definitely flying by.
I thought
there.
it was debris.
It could be debris. Something is flying by. Things move really fast in outer space. I will tell you that. To stay in orbit, you've got to have a really high velocity. So, hey Pam, welcome to the live stream today. We're talking today a little bit about Apollo and the Apollo program and what our goals are for the videos. But right now we're talking about the iterative engineering approach that is SpaceX and why when a rocket blows up, and I'm talking about one specifically with no one on it, like Starship, it still can be a huge success, even though the rocket was gone. Data is the key to being able to understand this, what to do and what not to do in the engineering approach. So, and I was talking to an engineer yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, I don't understand how that could be, in engineering, how Starship could, how it could blow up and still be successful when it's a $2 billion rocket." Well, one, I don't think it was a $2 billion rocket. It's part of a very expensive commercial program. But what I do think is those rockets are not as expensive because they don't necessarily build just one article and hope to fly it. They've got a whole line of them so they did the same thing with Falcon 9. So Falcon 9, I think, started, there was the Falcon 1, and then I remember watching a lot of the Grasshopper, where they were flying this, it was really interesting. They were flying this small little thing in Texas, and they would fly and land it. And I just thought it was amazing that they were doing this. Well, then all of a sudden, here comes Falcon 9. And they crashed probably if you go on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the chat, you can watch the RUDs.
There's probably 20 or 30 of them in a row.
You can watch the RUDs set to great music. And the RUDs are rapid unscheduled disassemblies. You can watch those. To see exactly what would be the iterative engineering process for Falcon 9. So let me see. I'm having trouble reading this chat. So let me get this chat over. Let's see if we can pull this out. So we're using this new software today. So I'm going to scoot this over here.
Put it up top.
Yeah. So they have to catch up. So. Think Train's talking about they have to catch up to the space station. Yeah, so the space station is going around in its orbit, just constantly going around the Earth. So when they launch, so let me get over here. They launch, the space station's going, so they're going to go and they're going to follow it, so all the way back. And as they go up, the space station will continue they'll both go the same way until they meet.
The reason it's important to get the proper speed, why it's timing really, is because the way orbital mechanics work, what they do is they launch and then for exactly where the ISS is in low Earth orbit, it's 17,500 miles an hour that you need to travel. It's very fast, but in space it's not really anything. Because if you go much faster than that, then your orbit starts to expand, and that's the reason you can't just simply speed up to catch it. You have to time it properly.
Yep. So that's great about Axiom Space, and I'm glad that it looks like they're successfully in round. And I'm not sure, sometimes it takes 18, 24, 36 hours for them to catch the space station.
Hello.
Hey, Miss Maggie, thanks for joining us tonight. It does take a little bit of time. So I do think the Russians were able to do very fast catch-ups to the space station. They could take an astronaut, I think it's as little as a couple of hours from launch to getting ready to dock with the space station. But I think
their orbital inclination is different.
Yeah, it's different, and there are benefits of being in certain locations for launch, and I think that's one of the benefits. It also increases the G load on the I think on the astronauts and stuff to shorten that runtime. So I think they kind of play it a little careful with SpaceX anytime somebody's flying. So today what we want to talk about, and we're learning this new tool. I don't see, at least right now, I'm not seeing the way to do the polls like we were into the YouTube live stream. So we're using a software called Open Broadcast Studio. Broadcast, so it does give us the ability to do something. We were hoping to have been able to, just like you see the images here, is to have the live stream of the SpaceX feed coming in. but that didn't work today. So we're going to continue to work to try to get that right. What I will say is we have a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to Apollo, and these are going to be the images you're seeing in the background. The Apollo images are unbelievable, and to think that these images were taken between 1961. When was the date of the speech?
The first speech was May 25th, 1961, 20 days after the first American went to space. And to say that you want to go to the moon is quite ambitious. But from 1961, the Apollo program was mainly implemented in 1963, I think. The first flight was somewhere around 67. No, the first flight was in 61, so that was for the Saturn one. This was before the Apollo program. But
yeah, it's just so,
it was a large time frame.
So 61, and we'll fast forward, 72.
61 to 72.
72, I think December 72 was Apollo 16, 17, which was 16,
Yeah,
right?
17.
17. December of 72. So that is a very short period of time from going from just basically the Gemini program to heading to the moon is like unbelievable. Yeah, ambitious, and I really wish, and I hope with visions, like where I like to see that the country was able to steer. Not everybody agreed with it. I've seen interesting takes on the Apollo program. So there was and we talk about this, the tragedy of Apollo 1. And those 3 lives of the astronauts lost right there on the launch pad. They weren't launching, but they had a fire in the capsule. And that tragedy slowed down Apollo, and it made people take it life and death serious. So it changed the direction and the way that the program headed. And I think that helped. So there was another video I was watching, and it was excellent. It made some great points. JFK was assassinated in 63, November
Sometime in
10th, 63, I think. Maybe Jack can look that up for us, but I think it was November, maybe 21st, 63. But so when he was assassinated, he was a big proponent for the moon, but from what this video had talked about, was he was getting a little...
November 22nd, 1963.
22nd, 63, yeah. So a couple years after his speech, he was getting a lot of political problems with the Apollo program. It was very expensive. But then when he was assassinated, it was the country got behind their president that was assassinated
And wanted to make that goal happen.
and made that goal happen. So I think those, and I think that's excellent points from the video. And I wish I remember whose video it was that I'd watched, but I thought that was excellent reasoning when you see like how are we able to do this over 50 years ago, and today it's really hard to kind of make these movements. So I think XX about how long till Starship is human rated. I don't know. That's part of the iterative approach. It could happen a year from now. If you can launch Starship 10 times, probably, with 100% success on both stages, with no major issues or problems to address, I think you can human rate anything. I don't think that's where they're at in the program right now. Although, Dear Moon is going to climb on that thing at sometime, I think, at the end of 23 or 24.
In the beginning of 24, I think.
So, the thing I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think at first maybe the orbital part of Starship, they may not ride that down. They may come back down in a Dragon. This is just guessing. They may dock with
They may test all the reentry systems
Yeah,
first.
yeah. I think that the second stage for landing in the
They
Starship
haven't
will be
had-
the part that takes the longest to
Yeah.
certify.
Because it's like landing a Falcon Heavy or a Falcon 9. When something goes wrong, it's a very big wrong, and there's no fixing it because you don't have an escape system anymore.
Yeah, and one of the things that
Because your escape system is blowing up.
they were testing earlier on Dragon was retro, like burning for landing. And I think they kind of stepped away from that. Parachutes are known commodities. I think it was, I'll be right back. I think I have some memorabilia I want to show.
So I believe this is from Apollo 15. One funny little thing about Apollo 15 is that they found a rock, and they named it was the parachute. It refused to open. I'm thinking of Apollo 16. But something about it, I don't know, it didn't open. But parachutes are, I think that defeats the whole purpose of what SpaceX was trying to do. But then you get to the Dragon capsule, which is a bit different. But
I'd forgot about this, but I think this is relevant to our conversation. So I don't know who this was mailed to, but
somebody.
This, sure, get this in front of the camera. This is from the United States Government Printing Office. And the postmark on this, let's see where's the postmark? It doesn't
$150
say.
per one set of 9 photos.
But I will show you, and it's hard to get this camera right, but look at that. So, Infinity Science Center right here in Stennis does a fundraiser, and I always try to support the fundraiser. So I try to buy some of the artifacts from the space program, and this is some original lithographs from
Let me see the envelope.
from NASA. So these are some of them, but this has something specifically about what we're talking about, and known commodities.
One set, I don't know if you can see that or not. One set was $1.50. Let me see, this is hard. This is very, very hard.
These are original. These are
9 pictures.
Apollo 15. These are the astronauts. I don't think we're going to replay the AX-2 launch. I think, it was an absolute great launch, Rocket Lover. Every time that you watch a Falcon 9 launch, it's always makes you more nervous when people are riding on it.
I don't think this is much of an envelope.
So these were mailed out, these lithographs, back in, for Apollo 15. So somebody paid like $1.50 for these. I think I paid a couple $100. But they're very good. This is the image that I wanted to show y'all. So this image, that spacecraft is relying on coming back in from orbit at a very high rate of speed. Now, the re-entry on the bottom of it has an ablative coating. And that ablative coating is designed to the way I've always thought about it is there's the fireworks that are the little snakes that you light on fire, and they kind of zoom up, and they create a layer and it burns off. And what that does is it absorbs most of the heat and pushes it away and keeps pushing it away. And I think it's not really the friction that's doing it as much as the pressure wave is putting the heat on it. So just think that is coming back into Earth at that incredible rate of speed, that little capsule right there. That's Apollo 15. That little capsule came in, probably, I don't know how fast it was. It probably was
Very
25.
fast.
Let me see. So the shuttle would come in at like 22,000 miles an hour. So this one had to probably be faster because it was coming back from the moon. So that came in, and then they launched their drogues, and then they had this. So there are 3 chutes on this. That's one of the chutes that didn't work. You don't have a lot of room for failure. So Starship will have the same. There's very little room for failure. Now, we'll tell you, when you see the Falcon 9s, they're launching these things 3 times a week now. I mean, the cadence of launch is unbelievable. And like I always ask people, because a lot of people said, well, you could never certify something used to fly again for human-rated space flight. And I always ask them, would you rather ride a brand new Falcon 9 or a used Falcon 9? And I'd rather ride a used Falcon 9. A crispy Falcon 9 is always is my first choice. So I'll show you a few more of these pictures from Apollo because I think they're really great. I think this is, and I'm sorry, I'm not good at looking at a backwards camera. This is Apollo 15. So this is, you have the rover there. What was the name of the ship on Apollo 15, Jack?
What was it? The Kitty Hawk?
Let's see if it says. Let me see it on the bottom. Why don't you read the caption for it? Because I can't read it.
Irwin salutes the American flag raised on the moon. Falcon is the lunar module, and the LRV, the lunar roving vehicle, is right next to it. It's a good little photo. And it's amazing. Digital cameras could not have done the same.
Well, definitely not in that time. Anybody who thought there was a lot of CGI on the moon landing should study the computers that they used for for the RAM on the Saturn V's flight computer. It's really easy to have an armchair quarterback to think you're using Mid-Journey AI to be able to create some kind of artificial scene like this. But
definitely not possible.
the CGI was not that good at that time. I mean, the computational power in this period of time was just wasn't there. I mean, we've come a long way, and we've seen quite a few upgrades in computing. And so I'll show you this one. So this one here is of the moon. Can you imagine getting a close-up view of the moon like this? So I will tell you. Let me go ahead. I'm showing this in this video. Let me transition this back to the full screen camera because I think it'll be better. Let's go ahead and do that. Sorry, this may be better. If that's better, let us know. And tell Jack in the chat.
Yeah.
All right.
It's looking better.
All right. So this here, can you imagine seeing the moon from this vantage point? This is what Dear Moon will see. You know, they'll be able to see the moon from this vantage point.
Yes, we have met a couple astronauts. Fred Hayes specifically.
Yeah, and Fred Hayes talked about this view right here, right? Jack, why don't you tell him about what you asked him?
So, obviously we all know that Apollo 13 was a major successful failure. There was a problem, and they were no longer able to go to the moon. So I asked Fred Hayes, what was the most disappointing part about the mission? And I think he said, like, exactly. You know, it wasn't the part about going home that was disappointing. It was the fact that he wouldn't get to go to the moon.
Yeah, he said as soon as the tank blew, he said he knew right at that moment he wasn't going to walk on the moon. And
He was more worried about walking on the moon than he was getting home. For a very short period of time, and then that was gone, so then there's no point in trying to.
Yeah, and Fred Hayes is, so he was Apollo 13 astronaut. The reason why we talk a lot about him is he was from Biloxi, or what they call on most places Biloxi.
Or
Mississippi, or Biloxi, Mississippi, but Biloxi. And he really supports the Infinity Science Center. In fact, I think there's astronaut Fred Hayes parking there.
He has his own parking space.
Yeah. So if you ever go there, you'll see the Fred Hayes spot right there at Infinity Science Center. But he's been really interesting to talk to. So when Jack asked him that question, you know, you could see he was, even all these years later, he was disappointed he didn't get to walk on the moon. He said, yeah, but you got to see that. I said, how many people got to see that? you know, and I wasn't showing him the picture, but I'm like, you're seeing the moon close up. He's like, not many. Yeah, a small handful of people have seen the moon that close up.
And he saw it closer than if you were standard, or if you were normally orbiting the moon, because usually your altitude's a bit higher.
I think he said they were around 200 kilometers.
Yeah, but they were a bit closer, I think, because they needed a more gravity assist.
Yeah, so Apollo 13 was definitely really interesting. So I do say if you're if you're interested in space, which we are, museums like the American Space Museum in Titusville, and I meant to, they just had an auction of some memorabilia, and I meant to buy some, but we were on the road and I didn't do it. One of the great ways to support them is to go buy stuff like this. Just people donate small pieces of the space history that, you know, heck, when this was mailed out, I might have been 6 months old, and so I never had an option to get this. So one of the things that I do instead is I try to support our local space museums by buying some memorabilia, and it's also cool for me. I hope to get these Apollos framed, but I wanted to show, this is another thing.
What is that, Mercury's?
This is...
Yeah, that's Mercury.
So we went to the
That's the thing that I just showed earlier.
So we went to the Space Force Museum, and this one is from Canaveral Space Force. So this is an original manual for, as you can see, this is a Mercury Redstone. There's that capsule Jack was just showing right on top. And this was, I'm trying to remember what this manual was. Let's see if they got it in the back. It came with all the pictures from the different rockets that they did, and I really don't want to mess this up, so I'll just kind of show a few of them. So when they were doing, before the shuttle, let me get this back over here, before they did a lot of these programs, they were launching a lot of missiles out of Kennedy or Canaveral Air Force Station. I forget what it was called. Somebody said it was called the Eastern Test Range because everything across the Atlantic was the test range. Those particular launches, they had a lot of time. Like, they would build them for one system and another and another and another. And then by the time Saturn V came in, they had to build this big one because the engines were just unbelievable. Very similar to the problem SpaceX had. The Saturn V was just an immense amount of power. They had to build something to divert the flame. They had to build flame trenches and get that away. But, you know, again, SpaceX, very close to sea level. They had to raise it up. It was a big civil engineering project. And SpaceX may have to do that, but I think in the meantime they're going to innovate across it, which is what happened in the Apollo program. Is they continued to innovate, and they built each of the missions, right? And Jack, why don't you pull up your documents? So Jack has been doing a lot of our research, and I'll let him start with one of the. We'll kind of start with maybe the different classes of missions, because not every Apollo mission had a person on it, right? Not every Apollo mission. Did any of them? Some of them had.
2 Apollo missions were uncrewed.
Were uncrewed. Apollo 1, that was
the Fire.
The Fire, and that was January 27th, 1967. So, and then I think we took an 18-month pause, right?
I think something like that.
So when that happened, we lost 3 astronauts, and
no, it couldn't have been an 18-month pause. I think it was just a 2 or 3 month pause, because coming up, Apollo 4 launched 10 months later.
10 months later. So maybe it was 6 months. I need to check that date on how long we paused for it. But safety became the primary issue. And we definitely changed our paradigm on how we did things. So we went, before we even launched the Apollo program, we had some rockets that launched before. And what class were those, Jack?
Those were the AS and SA.
And what are those?
So SA was the testing of the Saturn systems. For example, the Saturn 1D and the Saturn 1, which were originally designed to go to the moon, but they just lacked the power. And then you went through the testing. For example, one was Project Highwater, which in order to determine the atmospheric physics. They sent up a full stage filled with water. I think 23 or 800,000 gallons of water, some insane amount of water. And then they sent it into the atmosphere and just blew up the rocket to see what the water did.
What were they trying to learn? Do you know?
The atmospheric physics. There was nothing. They weren't able to recover much other than visual.
Okay.
And then you get to the SA-4, which is an engine out thing to test whether you can have an engine out and it still be a successful mission.
Jack, what was the one? So Jack was telling me the story as he was doing the research, and I know I've seen the video before, but what was the one?
The Little Joe. So this is an interesting. So hand me it, just the top piece. So most rockets have this. This is your escape tower. Oh, I'm moving it the wrong way. This is your escape tower.
It
So
sits right here.
you need to take
Put it on
this. You need to. I'm pointing at it, and I feel like it's wrong.
It's backwards.
So this is what you need to keep safe, and this. Oh my God, this is weird. This
Yeah, let me put this
accomplishes
on.
that mission.
This will make it easier. So
This takes this safely. But the test was, so Little Joe, this was for the Apollo program. So their goal was to send the rocket up, I think detonate the rocket, and continue to test this by
this piece,
igniting
so this
the
piece
engines.
pulls
And
the whole thing away from the rocket.
This is not an Apollo rocket. This is a Mercury rocket. But same
system.
Same system. So their goal was to send it up, have the rocket blow up, and then ignite the launch escape system to pull the capsule away. But in designing or constructing the rocket, they installed the gyros backwards. So instead of it going straight, it spun out of control, and it disintegrated rapidly. It spun. I'm sure you can find a video of it, but what happened was it spun, and it spun so fast that it ripped itself apart. And then it was actually the perfect test for
The launch
a
escape
launch
system.
escape system.
Failure became the
It
best
was a
test.
successful failure.
Yeah, that's definitely. I don't think anybody was on board, but it was definitely would have been an interesting ride. And I think launch abort systems. Boeing on their, or no, was it the Soyuz? I think had one, and I think Boeing. I don't think it was manned, but I think they had something happen where they had to use it, and Blue Origin as well. So they're very important. Now the shuttle didn't have one.
They did. It was it. The shuttle didn't have.
It could land.
They had parachutes. They had the hatches.
So, well, wait, no. The first, so Crippen and Young, I believe, had ejection seats.
Mm-hmm.
They could have ejected out of the shuttle.
Oh, Wally Schirra, I think, and I don't remember who it was, but it was the Mercury 4-inch flight. What happened was the rocket ignite. No, not the 4-inch flight. The 4-inch flight was an uncrewed mission, but it was another test for a Mercury rocket. And what happened was all the engines ignited, and then something was wrong, and then the abort sequence went properly. It jettisoned the tower. The parachutes deployed. But what happened was they had the option to eject, but they didn't because they trusted their system. And I think he said that later. That
Yeah, we're in the process now of trying to get better on our streaming. So I'm looking here at our streaming, and one of the things that I'm missing from this thing is this poll, because I want to ask everybody, like, how many people do you think walked on the moon? How many people total have walked on the moon? Anybody want to guess?
let me see. I think I can switch this over.
No, that's not going to work on this.
Close up the live chat. You could switch it over and go back to. You could switch it back to the YouTube, but their polls are not set up properly.
Yeah, so we have more.
You might try to minimize that.
We have more work to do, but if you have an idea on how many people have walked on the moon, I want to
Go
see.
ahead and put it in the chat.
Go ahead and put it in the chat, because what I want to do is see how accurate most people are of what we've done on the moon, because that's really interesting to like what is reality versus what has happened in real time. And this chat is kind of not working like I'd like it to, so I'm trying to put it in the right spot.
Minimize it. There's the little
So
thing.
put in the chat right now, how many people do you think have walked on the moon? That is one of the questions. I'm gonna go ahead and take this out of studio mode, so I probably have a better place to put the chat. So there's definitely a learning curve on this broadcast, but I think it does give us a lot of the features everybody was asking about. But one of the things is you have to learn. So how many astronauts do you think walked on the moon? So that would be everybody put their guess in, and Jack is going to give you the answer. And it's as of right now, I think they're all Americans. There's been no other people to go to the moon. That may change here shortly in the next few years. I expect that, especially with the commercial space program, people are lining up to ride SpaceX rockets to go to space, and that is definitely going to change it. I mean, like today, it's 2 paying astronauts from a nation state from Saudi Arabia that are riding a Axiom-2 going to a space station. And Axiom is going to put their own space station in. I always think this is a really cool photo. Kind of shows, the astronaut on the moon with the car and stuff like that. Just think about the engineering time that was spent on Apollo, of just learning how do we get our astronauts a little bit further out, away from I think I figured this out.
That is wonderful.
I figured out the challenge.
But the answer to that, to the how many astronauts were on the moon, the total is 12. You have Apollo 11, Apollo 12. You didn't have 13. You had 14, 15, 16, and 17. So it's a total of 6 missions that went to the moon.
So, but not everybody on the mission went to the moon. Well, they went to the moon, but they didn't walk on the moon.
So
what did the other person do? Does anybody know?
This is an interesting question.
So
because not many people know this.
They're
I mean, a lot of people know this, but it's a relatively little known fact.
There's 3 people on board an Apollo mission, and 2 of them walk on the moon.
One was braver than the other 2.
So what did that other person do? So put in the chat what you think the other person did. So 3 people go up and 2 walk on the moon. Where was that other person at? Go ahead and put your best guess in the thing. It's not that hard to figure out. I can tell you where they weren't. They weren't actually walking on the moon. They weren't in the they weren't in the other one. Yes, they waited for the others to come back. And what were they doing? They had one of the hardest jobs I think you could possibly have.
I wouldn't say hardest.
That-
Scariest.
Okay. No, floating around all by themselves. Hey, Fusion
Howdy.
Viper. They were floating around all by themselves. And if the other astronauts could not make it back to the capsule, they had to go home without them. And one of my favorite movies of all time is The Martian. And can you imagine those astronauts that had to launch knowing that there was another astronaut on the planet and they left them?
Another
Because
good reason to not want to be an astronaut.
There is once you push that button, there's no going back. I mean, you don't have enough
Delta V.
I mean, The Martian is a great movie, and They did a lot of real rocket science to make the book, to write the book. And I didn't realize this, but do we have any fans of The Martian here? Anybody like that book or the movie? I learned something about it that was really interesting. Yeah, definitely the bravest person was flying around the moon by themselves. Their buddies went down to walk on the moon, and they stayed just circling it while they were down there. That's a little. Anything goes wrong, so I watch a lot of sailing channels because I really like watching it. The sailing channels are interesting, and you see. So one of the channels, shout out this. I'll put it in the chat. Sailing Tritera. The guy is sailing from Fiji to New Zealand, and we watched his premiere last night, and he hit some pretty rough seas last night in that video. He's out there alone. He's by himself on a 30-foot boat in the middle of the ocean. And then think about the astronauts. You're on the backside of the moon. If anything goes wrong, you have yourself, and that's it. Until you come around back into the radio communication, you can't even talk to NASA. And now, luckily, you have a lot of engineers and a lot of people that are working to help you. And the engineers and every astronauts and all the people that worked on the Apollo 13 problem, I mean, they helped those astronauts get home. It takes a lot of people to fly. It's not just the astronauts. The astronauts, in my opinion, are the bravest. They climb on top of the fully loaded,
large explosive.
yeah. You don't want to have that launch escape system. You don't ever want to have to use that.
But you're lucky that you had to.
Yeah. So
because if you know that you had to use it, you're in a good place.
Yeah, and so they are the bravest, but they don't make the whole program. They are the lucky few that get to go on the work of the many, and so it's never. While they're the face of the program, it's the engineers, it's the workers, it's the people who when we were at Starbase, it's the people who climb the rockets, who install the pieces, who work on the valves. That's the people who make space travel happen and spacecraft. They're the everyday people that necessarily their songs aren't sung, but they're the ones who build it. So a couple things that I learned about the Martian that I wanted to share with anybody is The Martian was written as a serial. The guy would write a chapter and then publish it online. And it became so good that I think Scott Manley covered that, if I remember right. That's where I learned that. And it's one of my favorite movies. If you haven't seen it.
Crowdsourced science.
Yeah. So if you hadn't seen The Martian, it's about an astronaut named Mark Watney who, and this happens in the first minute of the movie. Sorry.
If you haven't seen the movie, shame on you.
No, not shame on you.
You're introducing it's hard to miss. It's a wonderful movie.
It's a good movie, but within about 2-3 minutes of the start of the movie,
you understand what it's
he's
about.
Basically on Mars by himself. The astronauts have launched, and he's just there to pick up the pieces. And if you've learned anything about space travel, everything's about how much mass that you're moving from one place to another. So they don't bring a lot of extra stuff. So you have what you have, and that's what it is. There's no manufacturing. There's no food. There's no water. There's what you have is what you have, and that's it. And it's a great story about being left on Mars. So
it's not a story, hopefully, that should never come true.
Yeah, so they did leave a lot of stuff on the moon, and this is a
lot of stuff.
This is important because one of the things that they've done is can you pull it up, Jack, on your computer? Is they've started to stage off areas around the moon landings as historic zones, because the areas around each of the moon landings has a radius. I forget exactly what it is. So we don't go in and let's see. So Jack's got to pull that up because I wonder how far around Apollo 11 it is. I think they all have historical, like a region around it that they don't want disturbed. They want those because nothing changes on the moon unless there's a meteor impact or something. The
Let's see.
footprints are still there. The equipment's still there. Probably a lot of like the flag is probably just toast by now. It's just dust. Nothing holds up to the unrelenting part of the sun. But what they don't want is somebody to come in with a rover and go view all of the moon landing stuff and then destroy all the footprints and stuff like that. So I think it's important for history that we protect these things, and I'm glad people were thinking about this.
Okay.
They're protected by U.S. law, but that doesn't mean somebody else won't go there and screw it up. So it's I do hope that people respect that, because I do think it was a giant leap, So it's something that an entire decade went to. It will be a state park, and you'll pay an entrance fee, most likely. And if we have a true commercial space program, you'll be able to rent a room in the underneath of the Apollo 11 Eagle. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope we protect it. But I do think we get better and better video every year. I think it's the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the LRO, that sometimes it does lower flybys, and they continue to pick up better resolution images, and you can see like the footprints. And
I'm not seeing how big the area is.
when you see Apollo 11, you could see it. Well, so here's the iterative engineering approach. Apollo 11, how long were they on the moon? Maybe like
2 days.
2 days. And then Apollo 17 probably spent like
4 days.
4 days. And
I
they
think
had
it was
a car.
4 or 5 days.
They had a car, and they were driving around and chilling out. And
They were on the moon for a day.
21 hours, 36 minutes. So when you see, like from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, when you see the video or the pictures of the moon landing sites, there's just a few paths where they move
I could have
around.
sworn that one of them was on the moon for 4 days. 22 hours for Apollo 17.
They spent
One of them was on for a really long time.
71 hours.
Yeah,
It was
Apollo
Apollo 16.
16.
What about 15? So 71 hours for Apollo 16. Apollo 15 was
18.
67 hours.
No.
Yeah, a total of 67 hours.
Oh, EVAs. Okay, yeah. Okay, 14. 14 was 33 and a half hours.
Yeah.
13 didn't go. And 12 is 10 days.
But that was
No,
the
that
whole
was the mission duration. They spent 31 hours on the moon. So
31 hours on the moon. So the longest period of time there was what, 71 hours?
which was Apollo 16.
Apollo 16. Just check 17 one more time and see what the because it might have been the EVAs that we looked at. And an EVA is just when they get out of the lunar module and do it.
The crew logged the longest. Okay, I don't know.
Apollo
Okay.
17 was the longest, 74 hours, 59 minutes. So basically 75 hours on the moon. And so how many days is that, Jack?
74 hours.
So Jack's going to do a little math because I don't want to do 74 divided by 24.
That's 3 days.
Right at 3 days.
Oh,
So
that should have been simple. But
it should have been.
we don't think simple for some reason.
So on the moon, 74 hours, so 3 days was the longest time we spent on the moon. So they definitely did more science experiments in the later missions. So each thing was designed to test a new thing. It was an iterative engineering approach, right? We're going to get there. Can we get there? Apollo 11. Or what? Apollo 10, actually. Can we get there? We'll go around the moon. Can we do all the things that we need to do without landing on the moon? Apollo 11. Can we land on the moon? Can we get the people? Can we grab some rocks? Can we put them back in? Can we launch back up, come back to Earth safely? Apollo 12. We did something else. Apollo 13. Well, there's a lot we were supposed to do, but we actually learned a whole bunch more.
A lot more.
Apollo
They learned
14.
how to convert the oxygen in the lunar module to the oxygen in the command module.
There was a lot of stuff. The picture in the background right there is, just one of the stages. So I think this is the picture now is when Apollo 11 came in. They launched that. You see the power coming off of that.
Yes, they
that Saturn
can,
V.
but it's only recognized under U.S. law, I think.
Yeah, it's just U.S. law right now. But
I'm sure there's going to be some space treaty, but
I do hope people are courteous of it, but sometimes I wonder whether or not we're going to have people be courteous. So
one experiment we left on the moon was a retroreflector, and that's just an advanced mirror, so that no matter what angle you shine it on, it shines it in the direction that it came from. But it measures the distance of the moon, which is an interesting little thing, and you can do that by the time that it takes for the light to come back, which is an interesting little thing you can do.
Yep. So still today, people can bounce light off of something planted on the moon. So parts of the Apollo program, we also crashed some of the second stages into the moon
for seismic readings.
Yeah. So we have seismic gear on there. There was the famous test of the feather and
I think it was 14.
the feather and the hammer, I think. They dropped and they fell at the same rate. It was the Isaac Newton. What happens if you drop
That was Apollo 15.
a feather and a hammer, and on the moon you see them fall right down together.
I just love that beep. I don't know why.
Drum in the ETB.
Something about that.
So
beep.
next week I'll work on in the live stream. We'll work on showing some of these videos because there and in our Apollo series videos, each one will have the different tests that they did. There's so much to learn from Apollo. I would argue that they're still learning stuff from Apollo. The moon rocks are probably still being examined in new and interesting ways. And, there's been a lot of science that came from it. The Genesis rock was one of the rocks that they talked about how the moon was formed. Then, how far that they were able to go away from the spacecraft. Who was the one that, John Young or Charlie Duke, that fell?
Charlie Duke.
Charlie Duke fell, and I think he was doing something, and he forgot how fragile the system he was in. He's lucky. He said he was lucky he didn't. Something didn't go bad. But just everything there is dangerous. Everything's
The moon is a dangerous place.
So,
even though everything's somehow super fluffy.
Yep. So this is our live stream for today. We're kind of wanting just to introduce the Apollo videos a little bit further. Watch the Apollo videos. It was great that AX-2 launched today. We were able to look at that and wish them Godspeed on their way to the station. I'd like to actually do a video of why everyone says Godspeed, because I think it's really interesting that every time you see someone,
Going to space,
wishing a rocket, well, good luck. It's Godspeed, Godspeed, and good luck. And that's how you say it for a rocket.
Why?
So
it's to be determined.
I
in
think
our next video.
I think this
One of
for
our
us and our iterative engineering approach.
Yes, he did. He had a very hard struggle getting up.
Yeah, I can imagine if he'd had really a lot of trouble, he'd have had to crawl across the moon until he got something he could pull himself up with. But luckily he was able to get up. The gravity is a little bit lower there.
I think if you were to just jump, push yourself up enough, you could try to flip over.
Yeah, you don't think about that, but just jumping, you can jump higher, right? Because your body is built for,
I think you can
8
jump.
times the gravity. What is it, 1/8?
I think it's 1/8 of the gravity.
1/8 of the gravity.
But then you also have a 200-pound suit with you.
Yeah, but still, I think you can get away really quickly. Oh, another thing that was interesting that I saw when they picked up Apollo 11 is a lot of the SEALs I guess it was SEALs.
The frogmen
that came and met the capsule. And the video will include this. They wanted to put these brightly colored flowers on the capsule, but NASA said no.
That was a big no-no.
So they basically put them on their suit and wore them on their suit. And so we got some great pictures to share, and that'll be in the Apollo 11 video. And you'll see the frogmen, they're wearing it. There's so much history and so much interesting stuff in Apollo that often gets overlooked. And I know we passed the 50-year mark, but we're still learning. It's less mass. So
It's a lot smaller.
so gravity is just the attraction between two. Well, there's a lot of things with gravity, but the simple thing is the more the mass, the more the gravitational pull. So the moon's mass is smaller than that of the Earth's, therefore it attracts you less.
And there's also pretty much no atmosphere on the moon.
And no atmosphere, but
It depends on whether they have a rocket thruster attached to their feet.
so that is interesting, Amanda. If I would say that the people on Earth are jumping off of the Earth with a rocket, would that not just be you left the Earth with a rocket? So it would be the same on the moon. I mean, if you have enough energy to get away, you can keep getting away. Eventually you leave I think it's called a gravity well. Basically, if you ever see them demonstrated in a physics class, they'll have a big, spandex kind of material, and they'll put heavy weights in it. And it dips. It basically dips in there. So everything's kind of attracted to each other, and it orbits it. And the mass keeps things in gives it the amount of pull that it has, and everything pulls on everything. So it's very complex from the physics side of things. There's a whole lot of things of why gravity is the way it is, and we're not going to get into that. That's way one above my physics, and two, not really super important for the rocket van. But I'm sure we can get somebody on to talk about that and why gravity is what it is. I know the mass is super important in it. And it's just like on a Jupiter, gravity is bigger. It's not, Jupiter's gravity is probably, I'm guessing, 20 or 30 times more than Earth. What is it?
What, Jupiter?
Jupiter's gravity. So, because Jupiter is much bigger, even though it's a gas giant, it's still much bigger. Let's see.
It's 2.4
2.4 times.
So, Jupiter. I think Saturn's a bit more than that.
So it is a gas giant, so it doesn't have some of the mass that, the harder mass. So
Saturn's about the same.
Saturn's about the same gravity as Earth. What is Mars? Mars is
1.8, I think.
Let's see, Mars gravity to Earth. Let's see, Mars is
bulk parameters. It's
sometimes you can get more information than you need. And I think this is the time.
It's 38% of Earth's gravity.
So basically a little more than a third of our gravity. And our bodies were built for gravity. So that's our. Are there any public restrooms on the moon?
So if you're planning to go to the moon,
Only in your spacesuit.
if you're planning on going to the moon, this is a fun family trip to go to the moon. Bring everything you need with you. Bring all your sunscreen, all of your oxygen masks, all of your food, because there will be no vendors on the moon, and there will also be no public restrooms. So don't attempt to use the restroom on the moon.
You have your private restroom in your spacesuit, which
It's a small
oh,
restroom.
the humanity. It's a very small. Just think about being in a spacesuit, all right? You got your arms in there, you got your helmet on, and your nose itches. And you keep hitting your mat, it doesn't really work. Yeah, I mean, there's no way to get. I always thought they should have been bigger. Because it should have been allowed the astronaut to step out, or at least move back into the suit to have better control inside the suit. I thought it should have had better flexibility on that, but I don't engineer spacesuits. So engineering spacesuits is a hard problem. it's a vacuum out there, and vacuums basically everything inside of there becomes a balloon and becomes super rigid. So you have to all the constraints have to be there. It does. So think about being in space when these astronauts go out and work on these long
So
EVAs.
1,600 meters per second, so 3,600 miles an hour to orbit the moon. I've been trying to find that, and that is a hard answer to find. Because no matter what you put, you'll always get, how fast does the moon orbit the Earth?
Yeah, there's
Lunar orbit velocity.
there's so much science that goes into this. So when they talk about rocket scientists, there's a reason. Rocket scientists are very knowledgeable on the combustion and propellants and being able to throw things out, and they study those particular things at the ideal rocket equation and how do you propel things, and so spacecraft, right? So rockets are one side. Satellites have propulsion. So a lot of times when satellites are used up, it's because their propulsion's gone. They can't raise themselves to higher orbit. And then they become junk. So a lot of things now, I know SpaceX is really working on things that deorbit faster automatically.
And then like
Big
Voyagers, like Voyager, they had to start shutting things down because their nuclear heater, their core, was no longer producing the same amount of power that it used to. And they had to start shutting things down. And also, the further you get away from the Earth, the less effective your radio transmissions will be.
Yeah.
So there's lots that go into designing it. And they shut down their cameras, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. And they haven't been on since. But if you were to see it, you would see a pixel of light, which would be the sun.
Yeah, and that's the Voyager program, I think, launched in 74, 72, somewhere around there.
was 74.
74. So, and there's Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. And those are the ones with the gold record that was designed by Carl Sagan and a few other people to be able to pass the information on to some other species, some other life form, really, if they ever found it, that they could be able to digest it. I've looked at the record, and Carl Sagan was a super smart dude. Like,
I don't think he understood it himself.
Smart, and it's on gold, so it should still be there. We probably should try to get this.
The sounds of the Earth.
Get this image up there. So it was a record. We should work on trying to do Voyager as well, because it's really interesting the process that they did for the gold record, how they made it, how you decode it, right? Because
there's a very interesting video about
how many LPs, 12-inch records do you think were out there, record players? I think they show you how to make the record player. They show you how to...
they show you how to play it, because on the spacecraft, I didn't realize, but there's a record player on the spacecraft. This little thing here.
So there's a lot of things there that explain, like, I think it shows the hydrogen atom. It shows a few different things to help explain it. Things that would be universal to all life, right? So hydrogen is, well, at least as far as we know. Remember, we don't know everything about the universe yet, but we do believe hydrogen is the same everywhere. And so if we show the hydrogen atom and we're dealing with an advanced life form, the hydrogen atom should be the same there. And there's different ways that they explained the pieces. I can tell you probably most life forms on Earth would have trouble decoding what is on the Voyager records. It was made by some really, really, really smart people who were not just thinking about how to pass a message on Earth, but to go further, to have that message get out to someone who doesn't understand anything we do. So there's a lot of thought that went into it. And as a kid, I used to watch Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and I think it's been redone. Has anybody else watched Cosmos?
I don't think they would have heard any sounds besides
Actually-
them breathing.
Actually, they did. They did hear a lot of sounds on the moon. They heard the radio chatter from the
The people
NASA
that wouldn't shut
and
up
from
in NASA.
and from the other person on the moon, and probably I don't know if they heard the command module up.
I'm sure they were talking.
So they were probably talking. They heard that. They probably heard all of the buzzing and whizzing that would be in one spacesuit. But other than that, they would hear no sound because it is a vacuum.
Near vacuum.
Yeah, near vacuum on the moon, and sound really travels best through a solid or through a liquid or a gas. And there's definitely not a gas enough to be able to pass sound on the moon. If somebody's got some way that happened, let me know, because
Now,
I will stand corrected on it. But I do believe all in the inside their suit, they were able to hear all of the radio transmissions and all of the other things going on. And I imagine you knew what were good sounds inside your spacesuit, and you didn't want to hear anything unusual.
other than that,
So
I think it would be cool looking at the golden record if somebody were to make the ones that look like somebody were to take that and put it in the picture frame and whatnot. That makes it look like they won a music award, and then somebody goes and looks closer at it. Oh, it's the sounds of Earth. Wonderful.
I'm gonna see if I can change this up a little bit so I can get that gold record up here for us, because I'd like to be able to show us the gold record. And so I'm gonna try to do a little experiment to get us the NASA archive video up and add this image real quick if I can get that going. Let's see if we can get the image up for us to do. I will tell you, it is a little complex to be able to try to move around on this many screens and computers all at the same time. But I'm going to try to get us a NASA archive video, and then that way we can try to not an archive video, but rather a NASA image, so where we can add this back to our live stream videos, so that I can show you
There are very little pictures of this.
of the NASA image of the Voyager moon record. So I'm gonna search for that right now, and I'll let Jack tell you a little bit as he finish. Let's finish up the Apollo thing while I pull this up, and then I'll talk about I'll download this image real quick.
The Apollo thing?
The rest of the Apollo.
Of the missions?
Yep.
So we were talking earlier about the timeline. For those of you who are still watching, the time is getting a bit long. We've been going for a little bit now. There's currently 4 people watching. So to the 4 people watching, thank you. But earlier we were talking about the timeline of the Apollo program, and it's a very interesting but long series of events. So you're talking JFK in 1961, May 5th, or May 25th, in 1961, said we wanted to go to the moon. So 8 years later, we did that. And then while this speech was going on, the first American man had just gone into space. And then the Apollo program was later organized in 1963. You had several test missions. You had, 6 test missions. And then you had Apollo 1, which was a bit of a tragedy. And that was 3 Apollo astronauts that were lost. Then we took a quick break. And then Apollo 2 and 3 were pretty much non-existent. They were test articles. And then you have Apollo 4, which was the first full-stack Apollo mission. That was the first full stack of the Saturn V, as you know it today. And one thing that's interesting about all the Apollo missions is they had an iterative engineering approach that was not really used in NASA, because what happened was everybody who would work on it, they found a small little thing that needed to be changed, and then they changed it, but they didn't document it. So to make the F1 engine how you used to optimize it, you could not do it. And that's why the first and last Apollos are very different. And then you go to the Apollo 5, which when you go back to the Saturn 1, and you go back and test some of your other stuff. Then Apollo 6 was the final uncrewed mission. It was the last test flight. Apollo 7, it was the first crewed Apollo flight. It was for Earth orbit to test everything in space with humans. Apollo 8, it was a lunar orbit and return. So you were going to the moon, flying around the moon, and you were coming back, and all of the systems that would be used during the Apollo missions that were going to the moon were used there. Then you go to Apollo 9, which was the first crewed lunar module test, which I think we have a picture up here of the lunar module orbiting Earth. You can see that, the blue background. And that was just to test the lunar module. You then get to Apollo 10, which was a wonderful mission. It was the last mission before we landed on the moon. And they did what was done with the Apollo 9 and the Apollo 8. And they mashed those together, and then you got an Apollo 10 out of it. So, after that, what happened was you launched, you got in your spacecraft around the moon, your lunar module, and you tested everything in the lunar orbit, communications and whatnot, and then you came back home. And that was pretty much the entirety of Apollo 10. Then you get to Apollo 11. It was a wonderful mission, as everybody knows. It went spectacularly. There were a few minor problems, like the, I think, 1202 alarms, which would not stop. And it was your slosh baffle inside of your tank. I think that caused that, is they didn't have slosh baffles on the lunar module, and they had to add those for 14, because what happened was you would slide back and forth, and then, but because you were sliding back and forth, your fuel would not mix properly, and so you were getting random warnings that you did not have enough fuel left.
So they added that as they went, yeah.
And then you have 12, which were struck by lightning. 13, we all know what happened with 13. 14, Alan Shepard played golf on the moon. He brought a club, or the head of a golf club, and he used it with one of the tools, and he played a round of golf on the moon. Nobody knows where the balls are. Apollo 15, a chute did not open. Apollo 16, they had a rock named Big Mooly.
You know, I was
largest lunar rock.
I was just born when that thing launched. So Apollo 16, almost the last Apollo I was born.
And then Apollo 17 had the last bit on the moon.
All right. So that's the Apollo program. We're going to cover all of those missions, and we're going to try to make a small video for each one. So we'd like you to check those out. This Voyager one is kind of really interesting to me, and I'm going to transition the video back over to this image because I think it's definitely something to look at. So if you're wondering about, like, if there's life out there, you're not the first person to wonder that. A lot of really smart people worked on that problem, that they wanted to send out a message. And Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were to capture some information, but with this opportunity to leave the solar system. So I think there's not many things that have left the solar system. I think it's maybe just Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 that are in interstellar space now. Those particular spacecraft carried these records on them. And I think records were kind of one of the technologies, but it's also something that would probably be easier to play than digital at that point. Maybe today we could do something a little bit different. That would be an interesting experiment or idea, is how would we do this same message?
How would the golden record
be today?
Changed?
Yeah.
50 years later.
How would we change that today? Yeah. So it had sounds of Earth. It had this. Maybe today they would do more just a screen that if you walked in front of it, it would start playing. But that's assuming that
It's a visual light
that it can
source.
see light sources and that in the spectrum that we see, or that it can see it all. And I guess the gold record assumes that too, because you kind of have to see it to
But you have some
understand it.
textile.
There are some textile stuff on it. It's a really interesting project that they did. It is very well done. Would anybody like to see a video deeper onto that one? If so, put it in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and switch back over, and I think we're gonna answer maybe a couple more questions from the chat, and then at that point, I think we're gonna shut down the video today. Where does anybody like this new broadcasting software? Did this make it better, or did they prefer the polls? What are y'all thoughts on it? Put something in the comments. Let us know what y'all are thinking. We'll switch back to our regular camera and get that going.
We're back.
What are y'all thoughts on whether or not we should keep using this software? Should we do it? Should we cover the Voyager? What are your thoughts? Yep. Is that interesting on the Voyager, or is there something else that you want us to cover? Yeah, space sounds like an actual vacuum. Well, I wouldn't know what it sounds like because my ears would probably explode.
I'm sure they've put GoPros in space.
Yeah.
Cameras of some sort in space.
It would be interesting to hear it, but you like it? Do you think the broadcasting suite is improving it some? I think today it would have been really nice if, you know how we had the images, like this particular view here, if we'd have had the launch coverage going on in the background. I think that would have been nice, but we weren't able to get that to work.
I think live streams are just a little bit tricky with...
Yeah, I think it would be nice to get some
inside
different...
inside of the software.
Yeah, it works good. We worked on intro. Yeah, there's a lot of different pieces that can move around on this particular. Like you can kind of fade in between the different views, so you kind of get the same kind of control that you would on a studio. And we're just learning. So any feedback, positive and negative, is helpful because, if it's only positive feedback you get, we'll never improve. And our goal is to get better at this. And today we have a lot of pieces going forward. What's that noise?
That's an ISS spacewalk.
Is that from inside the suit?
No, that's from outside the suit.
It sounds like probably what the sound
vibration.
is probably coming from the vibrations on things. So maybe we can put that in the chat. Why don't you put that link in the chat? And because I think you can kind of hear
That space sounds like nothing.
what space sounds like. That there's an EVA there. Yeah, the gold record I think would be a really interesting thing. And you got to wonder if what would we send today? Would we send a gold record? Is it still the best technology that we would send, or would we try to do something else? Anybody have any ideas of what we could send? And please don't say like.
Is he wearing a smartwatch?
Because I don't think it would. Maybe it would laugh. I watched some pretty good alien movies that have pretty good senses of humor, so you never know. But I do think the gold record was, well, it's timeless, right? Because I don't think we're gonna ever get it. It's gone out to the.
They have lots of replicas, but
intergalactic
there will
space
never be
now.
another gold record.
So they ran into they get past the point where the sun has influence. I think they've done that already.
Yes, I did. The astronaut that lost his shield. people thought it was a UFO for a little while. I'm not really sure why, because there's a video that says, and is titled, "Astronaut Loses a Piece of Equipment," and they still thought it was a UFO, even though the video shows the piece that he was just holding floating away.
It becomes space junk at that point,
And
right?
some people just don't realize that things just float off, and it does it all the time. That's why they have so many pieces, because when your dexterity is next to nothing, you gotta expect to lose a couple things.
Do you think that's where Velcro came from? They were trying to keep things in place. That definitely, related to the space program. There's a lot of things like that they had to hold things in place. I mean, there's so many technologies done. So we've got a few other videos that we're working on. I don't want to spoil them. We are trying to get better. We had a little bit of a computer problem on this Apollo video. We thought we'd had another one. How much money was that? What?
The
money?
shield.
Oh,
I'm assuming you're speaking of the shield.
I don't know.
Some government money.
I don't know how much money it was, but I do think, and I'm trying to. I know that the astronaut lost something. I don't remember if it was a shield or what, but it is traveling very fast.
17,500 miles an hour,
So
plus whatever velocity was applied to it.
If you follow any other space channels, one I suggest you follow is Scott Manley, and Scott Manley just did this great video, and he was talking about the fastest space shuttle and being able to track how fast they were and how the orbit that they were on specifically controls the speed and the inclination and stuff like that. He's definitely got great information on his channel. I highly recommend watching Scott Manley's channel. There's been several channels that got us into to become interested. Well, I've always been interested in space, but it's definitely continue to grow, and we watch a lot of other channels, and we'll share those as we go. But Scott Manley would be one to watch, and he's got some great videos and stuff like that. I do think that we'll continue to try to add great content. In a couple years, maybe someone will look at our content saying, "Hey, this was interesting." So, because we hope to start doing interviews here soon with some of the people we've met along the way. We've got to get
We got to start building it up some more. Get some more people to see these things.
more people. We have to get our iterative engineering approach. This is our broadcast iterative engineering approach. We did a test broadcast earlier just to try the different features. I really want to get the video working. So I think this is going to wrap up our live stream today. And Jack, anything else?
Thanks for watching. Stick around to see some future videos, regardless on whether it's, from the gold record to losing shields in space. Hopefully, those are put out. Yes, more shorts need to be done. You can put out lots of videos that are just quick and simple. And the trick is coming up with those video ideas. But if you work at it enough, you'll get it. But otherwise, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of the above that are below. All of the above that are below, all of the below. Really.
All the below that are above and above that are. It gets a little.
Because we're at 197 subscribers. We got 3 to go to 200.
Yep, so we're going to try to hit that 200 mark today. So let's
today or tomorrow.
See if anybody can help us hit that 200 mark. That'd be great.
Make sure to share this. Use it, and just please.
If you don't want to share this one, share
some of our other videos, because we have lots of other videos that are quite educational.
Yeah, share the Apollo, the NASA logo video, the meatball or the worm, which team you're on. Share the Sewing in Space, one of our first videos. The more those videos get out, the better it helps grow the channel, and we start picking up subscribers from that. And we're going to keep trying to get more interesting content. We got a lot to learn.
Yep.
But for Rocket Van, I'm Chad.
And I'm Jack.
Roger, over and out.